My name is Stefan Benchoam. I'm from Guatemala. I'm the co-director of NuMu, which is Guatemala's first and only contemporary art museum, and the director of Proyectos Ultravioleta, a gallery and hybrid space that's been operating since 2009. So NuMu is a project that we started with Jessica Caire, who's also an artist, and we started in 2012. But the conversations behind the project started many years before, and actually other people had similar conversations too. It's the fact that we didn't have a museum for contemporary art in Guatemala, so we, for a long time, were thinking of what that could be. Of course, always imagining a museum as we know it in the rest of the world, which is a big space, big white cube, very flashy, and what have you. And so we thought of or look to find ways to be able to accomplish that, only to be faced with the imminent reality of Guatemala that doesn't exist, that possibility doesn't exist there. And so in 2012, as we were looking for a space for Ultravioleta, because we had lost our first space, we were driving through this very iconic building in Guatemala City, and I turned around and it had a sign for rent. And so it was a Sunday, and I called, because I wanted to see it, and the guy said, we can see it tomorrow, and I was like, no, we have to see it today. I was imagining Ultravioleta. The place itself is a kiosk where they used to sell eggs in the shape of an egg. So it's a very particular building, and I thought it would be great, we don't have an Ultravioleta for the last 6 months. This is our new one, this egg. And I saw it inside and saw it was complicated, and so I went back. Jessica was living in New York at the time, and I was having a Skype with her that day, and I told her, guess where I went today? She's like, where? And I'm like, I went inside of the egg. She's like, no way. And I'm like, yeah, how come? And I explained the situation and that it wouldn't work for Ultravioleta. And then we already had a name for NuMu, because we thought we were going to do it a website. And then we both had that aha moment where we're like, NuMu, let's do it. And so we decided to rent it, and we took a lease for a year. And we called Federico Herrero, who's a friend and artist, and we said, Fede, we've got this project, we want to do Guatemala's first museum. It's this egg. We want to open it with you. Are you available? And he was like, Oy cara, it's incredible. You have to do it. Let's totally do it. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation. And so he came to Guatemala. He started painting the museum itself, the inside and the outside, and then we started to do this whole marketing campaign where we took MoMA's logo, we cannibalized it, and we turned it into NuMu's logo, which looks exactly alike, only ours is nicer. And we then started to promote it in different places, and we said, we didn't announce what the building would be, and we said, come to the opening, it's going to be in such and such date. We had a press conference, with our logo printed all the way in the back behind us. We called all the press, we dressed up with Jessica to be as formal as possible, and then that day came and we had, I think, 2 or 3 people from the press, I think 2, and 4 people from our families. And we had this press conference. It was very, very nice and very special. And then the day of the opening, we revealed the place where it would be. And it was really funny to see people come, because everybody imagines a big museum, right? And so some people were wearing very fancy suits and jewelry, and it was bling bling, because it was the opening of the National Museum, or the first Contemporary Art Museum. Half of the people left super upset when they realized that the actual museum wasn't that egg. They were offended, this is a joke, how could you? And we were just very serious about it the whole time, and the way that we would talk, almost like a performance, we're okay, so this is now museum directors, let's talk as such. And we've had the project now for 5 years. We've worked with some really incredible artists that have been really generous to think of site-specific projects for the space, and also some incredible curators too. And so it's just been a really fascinating project to see grow, because it affects different communities in a different scale. From the very immediate community of the NuMu, which is people that wouldn't ever go to a gallery or to a museum. Now they come to us and they're like, I like this exhibition because of this. That thing that you did wasn't working because of that. So it's been really wonderful to see it. And then at the same time, it's affecting a broader audience, the art crowd, and also other people that are challenged to think, what a museum is and what it could be and what it should be. Our museum, it's very small, but it's open 24/7, every day of the week. It's always free. We do free interdisciplinary projects. We do educational activities for every exhibition that we do. And we're also the most visited museum in the world, which nobody would have thought of, many years. And we're in Guatemala, most visited museum in the world per square meter, but we're there. And so it's just been a real joy to work at that project altogether. I think it depends on the fair. It is like an interesting panorama also, because now there's more and more fairs. Like each week we're getting an email to apply for a new fair, a fair that we didn't know existed, right? And so that's not sustainable in any way, right? There's not enough collecting, there's not enough galleries, there's not enough content, there's not enough to sustain it. And so I think more and more fairs themselves have to rethink how they actually make things work. Like before, there were so little fairs that the fairs themselves, they didn't have to do all that much because everything worked. There were enough collectors to feed the demand and for every gallery to make great sales. And now more and more this is less so the case. Also there's these really difficult schedules to keep up with. Like just right now as we're here in Basel, there's Munster, there's Kassel, there's Athens, there's Venice, and there's all these other things that are happening. So how do you get these people into this fair, and how can you make that actually sustainable for everyone? It's tough. So I think the fairs themselves, they have to rethink a little bit of the model, because otherwise there's new initiatives that are being thought of from the galleries, like Condo, which is incredibly smart, this project by Vanessa Carlos, where it's just more so thinking from the point of view of the gallery, and also thinking from the point of view of generosity, like how can we think and rethink a model that we inherited, because the fair model still works, like for the bigger galleries, the blue chips. Like you see them celebrate, like after the first day of Basel, they're like popping the champagne, and we're all the small galleries, and we're like, have a little bubbles come our way, and it's not necessarily the case, So they thought of that system, it works for them, but I think there needs to be a major shift, because the way things are going now, it's very, very, very tough to have a gallery anywhere, whether it be New York or Berlin or London or Guatemala or Bogota or anywhere. And Condo is doing that. And you sense it, that the directors of the major fairs, they're a bit concerned, because of course as a gallery, why would you want to pay anywhere between 10 and 30, 40,000 for a booth for 3 days or 5 days or 6 days, when you could, have a show in another gallery in a major city for a fraction of that cost, that has more impact in a way. That's more generous to the audience, because they can actually see an exhibition in a space that's designed for exhibitions or thought for exhibitions. So something is going to have to shift, but it's just a matter of time to see what that's going to become. Oh yeah. I mean, it's happening. We haven't necessarily figured out what that's going to be, but we're all suffering from the same illness, which is, it's very hard and very on many levels, to be spending all this money just to have a chance to sell. We're always talking about the same problems, and so we haven't necessarily found the model. But exercises like Condo really help change that, I think galleries, no matter their size or their age, we're all being affected, by the market right now, So whether it's galleries that are sharing spaces and just altering exhibitions between them, that's a good model, recently also, I've been involved in some conversations with a possibility of opening, together with 5 or 6 other galleries, opening a second space in a different city, and what that means potentially is that if we get a good place and for a good cost, and we each pay a sixth of the cost, and we do 1 exhibition per year, each of us, and that's still pretty good, because it gives us access and it gives us, a different type of circumstance, and so those are conversations that are just starting now, but I think that's where everything is going. That's kind of the future. Where you don't have to have a physical space, one particular place, but that you can actually have it in different places at the same time.
That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. It's just starting, but I think there's a lot of us that think it's important. You know, and it's also again more enjoyable. Because it's tough to be going to these events. They're like marathons. They're very long hours, and it's just I actually think it's funny because people that are on the outside, they hear this and they're like, you're going to New York and you're going to London, you're going to Basel, like how nice. Yeah, it's wonderful because you see incredible people, you go to incredible places, but the reality is most of the time you're stuck in the confines of a booth. You're not touristing and going around, but it's hard work. And so I think these models are going to have a particular shift, but we're just at the very beginning of those conversations in general. And it's not clear what that model is going to be, but it's starting to articulate itself. I think Venice is a very particular case because they're giving less and less support to the artists. Of course, they want to help out and get the funding methods, but oftentimes it doesn't particularly happen. In the particular case of the artist that we're showing there, he applied for, he's half Canadian because that's where he grew up in exile, and so he applied for a big grant from the Canadian government, which he didn't get. Luckily though, we had been kind of like smart about it, in that we had been like putting up a fund from sales from the works from him on a side, like an emergency fund in case we needed to use it to fund the project, because at the same time, it's important for him to have the best presentation possible. We also want that for him, of course, and also for the gallery. And so we were able to not have to panic and not have to worry about that. And also, credit where credit is due, Biennial, what they did do is that they spoke to a patron of contemporary arts from Latin America, and she actually supported with the shipping of the works, which is a major cost. So it's been like a constant struggle, and to be able to do that. In the case of Documenta, it was a similar thing, where they really genuinely wanted to be as ambitious as possible. And I think also in the case of Adam, he's very strict, that he doesn't want to have that involvement of galleries in that way. He's very, I guess, traditional in that way, or old school, that he wants to keep it as clean as possible in the conversation, as less polluted as possible, which also presents a series of complications. We have 3 artists from the program there, and another artist that, together with a couple of friends, with Carlos Morales and with Alejandro Torun, we've been working with very closely to try to document his work and really position it for the future. And it was an interesting situation because at the very beginning, they said they were going to be able to cover the whole thing, and it was only 4 or 5 months ago that we learned that was not going to be possible. So that they only had a third of the actual budget that they needed, and so we went into an emergency situation, always of course working with them, but to try to see how we could actually make this project a reality. Also because the circumstance of this artist, Joaquin Orellana, he's 86 now. And he's been almost forgotten, even though he's been making some really incredible, like, avant-garde work. Because of the lack of infrastructures in Guatemala, he's been left in the shadows, And so we helped with the fundraising for the project itself. We were able to talk to some really generous private donors, people that we've connected with, or that I've been able to connect with over the course of the last few years. And at the same time, surprisingly, the Ministry of Culture in Guatemala, they said that they would support the project, so they paid airfare for 5 marimba players that are needed to perform, which is completely unheard of, and I'm still kind of in disbelief that it's happened, but it is. And so, it's important to thank them, or to at least acknowledge that. And then it's just been a constant like push and pull to try to find ways to make these projects work. Of course now with the world the way things are, there's a lot of urgencies, and it's hard to, come to terms with funding a project that's so big when there's, like disasters happening all through the Middle East, in Latin America, where there's these like very urgent circumstances, or even in the U.S., like with what they have right now, it's a disaster, So it's understandable that a lot of these foundations that normally would sponsor these projects have now said, you know what, we want to put our money elsewhere, So it's just a matter of like trying to figure out how to do it in a way that it works for everyone.